On a bitter February morning in 2006, in the small coastal town of Rockport, Maine, a mother named Sarah Mitchell walked into the Knox County Sheriff's office carrying a photograph of her daughter. The girl in the picture was smiling, wearing a yellow raincoat, her dark hair pulled into pigtails. Her name was Emma Mitchell. She was 7 years old, and she had not been seen since the previous afternoon when she failed to return home from her walk to the neighborhood corner store. The deputy who took the report noticed something immediately. Sarah's hands were steady as she filled out the paperwork. Her voice never wavered, but her eyes never blinked. Not once. Not during the entire 23 minutes she sat in that interview room. The question that would haunt investigators for the next 16 years was simple but terrible. What happens when the person most desperate to find a missing child is the same person who knows exactly where that child is? The town of Rockport sits on the edge of Penobscot Bay, a fishing community where lobster boats bob in the harbor and the smell of salt water mixes with diesel fuel and pine. Population 3,300. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked and children ride their bikes until the streetlights flicker on. In February, the town turns gray. The sky presses low over the water. Ice forms along the edges of the docks. Snowbanks line the narrow roads, pushed high by plows, creating walls that narrow the world into corridors. Emma Mitchell lived with her mother Sarah and her stepfather Daniel Corrigan in a small Cape-style house on Harbor View Road, 3 blocks from the elementary school. Sarah worked part-time at the public library, shelving books and helping patrons with computer searches. Daniel worked for a commercial fishing company, maintaining equipment and occasionally going out on the boats when they needed extra crew. They had been married for 2 years. Emma called him Danny. Neighbors said the family kept to themselves but seemed pleasant enough. They attended the Methodist church on Easter and Christmas. They shoveled their walkway. They waved. The morning of February 14th started ordinary. Sarah made oatmeal with brown sugar. Emma complained that it was too hot and blew on her spoon for several minutes before eating. Daniel had already left for work at 5:30 that morning. The boat he was assigned to was heading out for a 3-day run. Sarah helped Emma into her winter coat, a puffy purple jacket with a fake fur collar. She double-knotted her boots. She handed her a $5 bill and reminded her to get change. Emma was walking to Donnelly's Market 6 blocks away to buy milk and a box of macaroni and cheese. She had made the walk before. Sarah watched from the front porch as her daughter trudged down the sidewalk, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. It was 2:15 in the afternoon. The temperature was 27 degrees. Light snow was falling. Emma never arrived at Donnelly's Market. At 4 o'clock, when Emma had not returned, Sarah called the store. Mrs. Donnelly, who had owned the market for 31 years, said she had not seen Emma at all that day. Sarah hung up the phone. She stood in her kitchen for several minutes, staring at the clock above the stove. Then she put on her coat and walked the route herself. She checked every yard, every alley, every gap between buildings. She knocked on doors. No one had seen Emma. She called Daniel's supervisor at the fishing company. They radioed the boat. Daniel was told his daughter was missing. The boat turned around immediately, still 4 hours from shore. At 6:43 that evening, Sarah walked into the sheriff's office. Clear's throat. Search began within the hour. Deputies drove slowly through residential streets with spotlights, scanning yards and wooded lots. Volunteers gathered at the fire station. They were given sections of town to cover, maps marked with grid patterns. The snow had stopped, but the temperature was dropping. By midnight, there were 87 people searching. They called Emma's name into the darkness. They checked sheds and garages. They walked the frozen shoreline with flashlights, looking for tracks in the snow. They found nothing. Daniel Corrigan arrived home at 11:30 that night. His clothes smelled like fish and diesel. His face was red from wind and cold. He embraced Sarah in the driveway. A deputy standing nearby noted in his report that the embrace lasted less than 3 seconds and that Daniel pulled away first. Inside the house, Daniel asked specific questions. What was Emma wearing? What time exactly did she leave? Had Sarah called everyone Emma knew? The deputy noted that Daniel did not cry. He did not raise his voice. He paced the kitchen, hands in his pockets, asking questions in the same tone someone might use to troubleshoot a broken appliance. The search continued for 6 days. Divers checked the harbor even though the water temperature made survival impossible. Search dogs were brought in from Portland. They picked up Emma's scent along Harbor View Road but lost it near the intersection with Mechanic Street, 2 blocks from her house. The dogs circled and circled but could not find the trail again. One handler said it was as if Emma had been picked up and carried, or as if her scent had been deliberately disrupted. Television crews arrived from Bangor and Portland. Sarah and Daniel appeared at a press conference on the 3rd day. Sarah read from a prepared statement, her voice mechanical, asking anyone with information to come forward. Daniel stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. When reporters asked questions, Daniel answered most of them. He described Emma's purple jacket. He provided her height and weight. He said she was a good kid who followed rules. When one reporter asked Sarah how she was holding up, Daniel answered for her. He said they were taking it 1 hour at a time. The reporter noted later that Sarah never looked at the cameras. She looked just past them, at something no one else could see. Investigators began reviewing the timeline more carefully. Emma left the house at 2:15. The walk to Donnelly's Market should have taken 8 minutes. Even allowing for a child's slower pace or stops to look at something interesting, she should have arrived by 2:30 at the latest. The purchase would take 5 minutes. The walk home, another 8 minutes. She should have been home by 2:45. Sarah did not call the market until 4 o'clock. That meant 75 minutes had passed before Sarah became concerned. When deputies asked why she had waited so long, Sarah said Emma sometimes stopped at a friend's house on the way home. But when pressed for the name of this friend, Sarah became vague. She mentioned 2 different girls. Neither lived on the route between the house and the market. Neither had seen Emma that day. Deputies also began noticing small inconsistencies in Sarah's account. In her initial report, she said Emma was carrying her backpack. Later, she said Emma had left the backpack at home. When shown the backpack, which was indeed at the house, Sarah nodded but did not explain the discrepancy. She said she must have misremembered. In one interview, she said Emma was excited about buying macaroni and cheese because they were having it for dinner. In another interview, she said they were planning to have chicken. When asked about this, Sarah said she had changed her mind about dinner and forgot to tell Emma. Daniel's timeline also raised questions. He said he left for work at 5:30 in the morning. The boat left the dock at 6:15. The captain confirmed this. Daniel was on board, but the boat's log showed they did not leave the immediate harbor area until 7:45. They spent over an hour near the dock performing equipment checks. Daniel could have left the boat during that time. The dock was less than 2 miles from Harbor View Road. When investigators asked Daniel about this window, he said he had remained on the boat the entire time. The captain could not confirm this. He had been in the wheelhouse. Other crew members said they had not specifically noticed Daniel during that period, but assumed he was working below deck. The physical evidence was minimal and strange. No one reported seeing Emma after she left her house. No one reported seeing a vehicle stopping near a child or a child being forced into a vehicle. The snow that had been falling that afternoon had created a light dusting on sidewalks and roads. Investigators found small boot prints consistent with Emma's size along Harbor View Road for approximately 1.5 blocks. Then the prints vanished. Not gradually, as if obscured by foot traffic or wind. They simply stopped, as if Emma had been lifted into the air. Inside the Mitchell-Corrigan home, investigators found Emma's room exactly as Sarah described it. Bed neatly made, toys organized in bins, drawings taped to the walls, mostly pictures of houses and trees and stick-figure families. One drawing caught the attention of a detective. It showed a large figure and a small figure. The large figure had its hand raised. The small figure had a red mark on its face. When asked about the drawing, Sarah said Emma had a vivid imagination and sometimes drew scenes from movies or books. She could not remember which movie or book might have inspired this particular image. Those who knew Sarah said she had always been reserved, quiet, difficult to read. She grew up in Augusta, the daughter of a nurse and a mechanic. She graduated from high school but did not attend college. She worked various retail jobs before getting the library position in Rockport. She had been married once before to Emma's biological father, a man named Robert Fletcher. The marriage lasted 3 years. Robert left when Emma was 2. He moved to Colorado. He paid child support sporadically. He called twice a year, on Emma's birthday and at Christmas. When investigators contacted him about Emma's disappearance, he seemed genuinely shocked and devastated. He flew to Maine immediately. He joined the search. He stayed for 2 weeks. Then he returned to Colorado, broken and helpless. Daniel Corrigan was harder to pin down. He had grown up in Rockland, the next town over. He had dropped out of high school in his junior year. He worked construction jobs and fishing jobs. He had no criminal record. He drank occasionally but was not known as a problem drinker. He and Sarah had met at a community barbecue 3 years before Emma disappeared. They dated for 8 months before marrying. People who knew Daniel described him as steady, reliable. Not particularly warm but not cold either, just neutral. A deputy who interviewed neighbors said one woman used the phrase carefully blank to describe Daniel's face, as if he had learned to show nothing. The investigation began to focus more intensely on Sarah and Daniel. Deputies noted that neither seemed to be grieving in expected ways. Sarah did not cry during interviews. Daniel did not ask searching questions about leads or suspects. Both seemed more concerned with maintaining their routines. Sarah continued working her library shifts. Daniel returned to work on the boats after a week. When the sheriff suggested this might look bad, Daniel said he had bills to pay and sitting at home would not bring Emma back. This was true. It was also true that most parents in his situation could not even imagine returning to work. Investigators brought in a forensic psychologist to observe interviews with Sarah and Daniel. The psychologist noted several concerning patterns. Sarah's affect was flat. She answered questions in a monotone. She rarely made eye contact. When shown photographs of Emma, she looked at them the way someone might look at a picture in a magazine, with mild interest but no emotional connection. Daniel displayed what the psychologist called situational awareness. He seemed constantly aware of how his behavior might be perceived. He cried once, briefly, during an interview, but the psychologist noted the tears appeared to start and stop on command. He used phrases like, "I know how this looks and I understand you have to suspect everyone," as if he were directing the investigation rather than being subject to it. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves. Something was wrong here, something beyond a missing child. There was a wrongness in the house on Harbor View Road that no one could quite name. The way Sarah kept the kitchen spotless even during the search. The way Daniel always stood with his back to the wall. The way neither of them asked the questions parents always ask. Are you doing everything you can? What about this lead? What about that theory? They simply waited, passively, as if they already knew the ending. But there was no body, no confession, no witness, no evidence of foul play, just a child who had walked into falling snow and disappeared. The case went cold within a month. The search teams disbanded. The reporters left. The town slowly stopped talking about Emma Mitchell. Her picture remained on a bulletin board at the sheriff's office, her smile frozen in time, her yellow raincoat bright against the gray background of other missing persons. The investigation remained officially open but inactive. Detectives moved on to other cases. Emma became a file in a cabinet, a name in a database, a mystery without an answer. Clear's throat. 2 years passed, then 5, then 10. Sarah and Daniel moved away from Rockport in the summer of 2008. They relocated to Lewiston, a larger city 90 miles south. Sarah got a job at a different library. Daniel found work at a tire factory. They rented a small apartment on the second floor of a converted house. They did not talk about Emma, not to each other, not to neighbors, not to coworkers. When asked about children, Sarah said she had no children. This was not true, but it was simpler than explaining. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the cold weight of suspicion settle into your bones and stay there, who have told yourself that you are imagining things even as evidence accumulates like snow against a door, you understand the particular torture of living with unspoken knowledge. Sarah knew. She had always known. From the moment she walked into the sheriff's office with Emma's photograph, she had known. But knowing and proving are different countries, and she lived in the space between them. The marriage deteriorated slowly, not with arguments or accusations, with silence, with separate bedrooms, with Daniel leaving for work before dawn and not returning until after Sarah had gone to bed, with dinners eaten in front of the television, plates balanced on laps, neither speaking, with anniversaries ignored, with holidays endured. They stayed together not out of love but out of inertia, or perhaps out of something darker, a mutual understanding that separating would raise questions. That divorce might trigger new investigations, that staying together was safer. In 2012, Sarah began seeing a therapist. She told the therapist she was having nightmares. In the dreams, she was searching for something she had lost. She walked through empty rooms. She opened closets and drawers. She called out but heard no response. She never found what she was looking for. The therapist asked if the dreams were about Emma. Sarah said she did not know. The therapist suggested that unresolved grief can manifest in symbolic ways. Sarah nodded. She did not return for a second appointment. Daniel began drinking more heavily, not publicly. He did not go to bars or cause scenes. He drank alone in the apartment methodically until he passed out on the couch. Sarah would find him there in the morning, empty bottles lined up on the floor beside him. She would step over him to get to the kitchen. She would make coffee. She would go to work. She would come home and find him in the same position, bottles multiplied. This pattern continued for months. In 2015, Daniel lost his job at the tire factory. The official reason was downsizing. The unofficial reason was that he had been caught sleeping in the break room 3 times in 1 week. He found another job within a month at a warehouse, but the pay was less and the hours were irregular. The financial strain added another layer of tension to the marriage. Bills went unpaid. Credit cards maxed out. The landlord threatened eviction. Sarah picked up extra hours at the library. Daniel picked up weekend shifts. They passed each other like ghosts in their small apartment. Then in the spring of 2016, something shifted. Daniel stopped drinking. He started going to AA meetings at a church near the apartment. He became quieter, if that was possible, more withdrawn. He stopped watching television. He stopped eating meals with Sarah. He would sit in the bedroom with the door closed for hours. Sarah could hear him talking sometimes, very softly. She assumed he was on the phone. She did not ask with whom. In July of that year, Sarah told Daniel she wanted a divorce. They were sitting in the living room. It was a Saturday afternoon, hot. The windows were open, but there was no breeze. Daniel looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded. He said okay. He said he would move out. He stood up and walked to the bedroom. He began packing his clothes into a duffel bag. Sarah watched from the doorway. She wanted to feel relief. Instead, she felt panic. As if something that had been barely contained, was about to break open. Daniel moved into a rooming house on the other side of Lewiston. They did not speak after he left except through lawyers. The divorce was finalized in November 2016. Sarah kept the apartment. Daniel paid nothing because there was nothing to pay. They had accumulated no assets, no property, no shared investments. They had only the years they had endured together and the secret they had kept. For those who have noticed someone changing in small, almost imperceptible ways, who have watched a person you once knew become someone you no longer recognize, who have wondered whether the change is growth or decay, you understand that transformation can be invisible until it suddenly is not. Daniel transformed during those months after the divorce. He stopped going to work regularly. He stopped attending AA meetings. He started calling Sarah at odd hours, late at night or early in the morning. He never spoke, he just breathed into the phone. Sarah would hang up, he would call back. In March of 2017, Daniel showed up at the library where Sarah worked. He stood outside the entrance, watching through the glass doors. Sarah saw him and felt her entire body go cold. She called the police. By the time they arrived, Daniel was gone. She filed a restraining order. Daniel did not contest it, but the calls continued. And now there were letters, left on her car windshield, slipped under her apartment door. The letters said things like, "I cannot live with this anymore, and the truth has to come out, and she deserves better than our silence." Sarah burned the letters. She did not show them to anyone. On the morning of May 2, 2017, 11 years and 3 months after Emma Mitchell disappeared, Daniel Corrigan walked into the Lewiston Police Department. He asked to speak to a detective. He said he had information about a missing child case from Rockport. The officer at the desk looked up. Something in Daniel's face made him pick up the phone immediately. A detective came down. Daniel was taken to an interview room. He sat down. He folded his hands on the table. And he said 5 words that would reopen everything. He said, "I know where Emma is." Clear's throat. The detective's name was Linda Ortiz. She had been with the Lewiston Police Department for 14 years. She was not familiar with the Emma Mitchell case. She asked Daniel to wait. She made phone calls. She contacted the Knox County Sheriff's Office. She spoke to the detective who had handled the original investigation, a man named Tom Brewer, now retired but still living in Rockport. Brewer remembered the case immediately. He said he had never stopped thinking about it. He said he had always believed Sarah or Daniel or both of them knew what had happened. He said he would drive to Lewiston immediately. While they waited for Brewer to arrive, Detective Ortiz asked Daniel basic questions. She asked if he wanted a lawyer. Daniel said no. She asked if he understood his rights. Daniel said yes. She asked if he was under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Daniel said no. She asked why he was coming forward now. Daniel said, "Because I am tired of carrying this alone." Tom Brewer arrived 3 hours later. He walked into the interview room and looked at Daniel for a long moment. Daniel looked back. Neither spoke. Then Brewer sat down. He set a recorder on the table. He stated the date and time and the names of everyone present. He looked at Daniel and said, "Tell me about Emma." Daniel told them everything. He said Emma had not disappeared on February 14, 2006. She had died 3 days earlier on February 11th. She had died in the house on Harbor View Road. Sarah had been home alone with Emma. Daniel had been at work. When Daniel came home that evening, Sarah was sitting on the couch. Emma was in her bedroom. She was not moving. Sarah told Daniel there had been an accident. She said Emma had fallen down the stairs. Daniel went to Emma's room. He saw immediately that Emma had not fallen down the stairs. She had marks on her neck, bruises that looked like fingers. Daniel said he panicked. He said he should have called the police. He said he should have called an ambulance. But Sarah was crying and saying it was an accident and saying please, and Daniel loved her and he made a choice. He said they would report Emma missing. They would say she disappeared on a walk to the store. He said this would give them time to figure out what to do. Sarah agreed. Over the next 3 days, they kept Emma's body in the house. They kept her bedroom door closed. They told neighbors that Emma was sick and sleeping. On the evening of February 13th, after dark, Daniel wrapped Emma in blankets and plastic sheeting. He put her in the trunk of their car. He drove to a wooded area off Route 1, about 12 miles north of Rockport. He carried Emma into the woods. He dug a shallow grave using a shovel he had brought from home. He buried her. He covered the grave with leaves and branches. He drove home. The next morning, Sarah enacted the fiction they had planned. She sent Emma on an errand that would never be completed. She waited the appropriate amount of time. She called the store. She searched the neighborhood. She reported Emma missing. Daniel said he could describe the exact location where he buried Emma. He said there was a split tree about 30 feet from Route 1. The grave was 15 feet beyond the split tree, near a cluster of birch trees. He said he had gone back twice over the years to make sure the grave was still undisturbed. It was. He said he was ready to show them. Brewer asked why Daniel had done this. Why had he helped cover up Emma's death instead of calling for help? Daniel said he did not have a good answer. He said he had loved Sarah and wanted to protect her. He said he had been afraid of what would happen to both of them if the truth came out. He said he had been a coward. He said he had lived with guilt and shame for 11 years and could not carry it anymore. He said he wanted Emma to be found. He said she deserved a proper burial. Brewer asked about Sarah. Daniel said Sarah had never admitted what happened. She had never said the words "I killed her." She had only said it was an accident, and Daniel had chosen to believe her, or chosen to pretend to believe her. He said Sarah would deny everything. He said there was no evidence except his testimony and Emma's body. Brewer asked Daniel to describe the marks on Emma's neck. Daniel described them in detail. Brewer asked if there had been other injuries. Daniel said Emma had a bruise on her cheek and a split lip. Brewer asked if he had taken photographs. Daniel said no. Brewer asked if he had told anyone else. Daniel said no. Brewer asked if Sarah had ever shown signs of violence before. Daniel hesitated. Then he said there had been moments. Times when Sarah grabbed Emma too hard. Times when Sarah's voice took on a tone that made Daniel uncomfortable. Times when Emma seemed afraid. Daniel said he had told himself he was overreacting. He said he had not wanted to believe Sarah was capable of hurting Emma. He said he had been wrong. The interview lasted 6 hours. At the end, Daniel signed a written statement. He agreed to lead investigators to the grave site. He was placed under arrest and charged as an accessory after the fact. His bail was set at $500,000. He could not pay it. He remained in custody. 2 days later, on May 4th, a team of investigators drove to the location Daniel had described. They found the split tree. They found the cluster of birch trees. They brought ground-penetrating radar equipment. They brought cadaver dogs. The dogs alerted immediately. The radar showed a disturbance in the soil consistent with a grave. They began to dig. They found Emma 6 feet down, still wrapped in the plastic sheeting Daniel had described. The plastic had preserved her remains. Her purple jacket was still intact. Her boots were still on her feet. The medical examiner confirmed the remains were consistent with a 7-year-old female. Dental records confirmed the identity. Emma Mitchell had been found. The autopsy revealed what Daniel had described. Bruising around the neck consistent with strangulation. Older bruises in various stages of healing on her arms and legs. A healed fracture of the left wrist that had never been medically treated. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was asphyxiation due to compression of the neck. The manner of death was ruled homicide. On May 8, 2017, Sarah Mitchell was arrested at the library where she worked. Two detectives walked in at 3 in the afternoon. They asked her to step outside. She did. They placed her under arrest and charged her with murder. Sarah did not speak. She did not resist. She did not cry. She simply allowed herself to be handcuffed and placed in the back of a patrol car. A coworker who witnessed the arrest said Sarah's face showed no expression at all, as if she had expected this. As if she had been waiting. The case attracted national media attention. News crews returned to Rockport. Reporters interviewed the original investigators. They interviewed neighbors. They interviewed Emma's biological father, Robert Fletcher, who said he had always suspected something was wrong. He said he regretted not fighting harder for custody. He said he would live with that regret forever. The sheriff who had overseen the original investigation said he had known the case would eventually break. He said he had retired but had kept copies of his notes. He said he had been right to focus on Sarah and Daniel. He said he wished they had found the evidence sooner. Public opinion was divided. Some people said Daniel was a monster for helping to conceal Emma's death. Others said he was a victim of Sarah's manipulation. Some said Sarah was a cold-blooded killer who had fooled everyone. Others said the full story would never be known and that rushing to judgment was dangerous. Emma's former teachers said she had been a quiet child who rarely smiled. They said she had sometimes come to school with bruises but always had explanations. A fall. A collision with another student. The teachers said they had documented these incidents and reported them to the school nurse, but that nothing had come of it. The school nurse said she had contacted Child Protective Services twice. CPS said they had visited the home but found no evidence of abuse. The case had been closed. For those who have wondered how evil can hide in plain sight, how someone can commit terrible acts and continue functioning in the world, how a community can miss signs that seem obvious in retrospect, the Emma Mitchell case provides no comfort. The truth is that Sarah Mitchell worked at a library and shelved books and helped patrons and smiled when appropriate. She appeared normal because appearing normal is not difficult. Humans are skilled at performing the roles they need to perform. We wear our faces like masks. We say the right things. We move through the world as if we belong in it, until we do not. Daniel Corrigan's trial began in November 2017. He pled guilty to being an accessory after the fact and to improper disposal of human remains. The prosecution argued for the maximum sentence, stating that Daniel's actions had prevented Emma from receiving help and had allowed Sarah to escape justice for over a decade. The defense argued that Daniel had ultimately done the right thing by coming forward and that his testimony had been crucial to solving the case. The judge sentenced Daniel to 12 years in prison. He showed no reaction to the sentence. He was led away in shackles. Sarah Mitchell's trial began in March 2018. She pled not guilty. Her defense attorney argued that Daniel's testimony was unreliable, that he was a liar seeking to reduce his own sentence, and that the physical evidence did not conclusively prove Sarah had killed Emma. The prosecution argued that the pattern of old injuries on Emma's body, combined with Daniel's detailed account, proved Sarah had been abusing Emma for an extended period and had ultimately killed her. They presented testimony from teachers, neighbors, and Emma's biological father. They showed photographs of the old fracture that had never been treated. They showed Emma's drawings, including the one with the large figure and the raised hand. The jury deliberated for 4 days. On March 27, 2018, they returned a verdict, guilty of murder in the second degree. Sarah sat motionless as the verdict was read. The judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing. Sarah stood. She looked at the gallery. She looked at the jury. She looked at the judge. She said, "I did not mean for this to happen." These were the only words she spoke during the entire trial. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sarah was escorted from the courtroom. She did not look back. Emma Mitchell was buried in Rockport in May 2018, 12 years after her death. Over 200 people attended the funeral. Her biological father gave the eulogy. He said Emma had loved drawing and playing in the snow. He said she had deserved a life full of joy and possibility. He said she had been taken too soon and by someone who should have protected her. He said he hoped she was at peace. The casket was small and white. It was lowered into the ground under a gray sky. Light rain was falling. People stood with umbrellas watching. Then slowly they walked away. Clears throat. The case of Emma Mitchell is not unique. It is one of thousands of stories about children who die at the hands of those who are supposed to care for them. It is a story about secrets kept and lies told and systems that fail. It is a story about how easy it is to hide a crime when the people most motivated to solve it are the ones who committed it. It is a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about trust and family and the capacity for ordinary people to do monstrous things. But it is also a story about persistence, about a detective who never forgot a small girl's face in a photograph, about a man who finally could not live with his silence, about a community that demanded answers. Emma Mitchell was found because someone decided the truth mattered more than comfort. Her case was solved because someone refused to let her be forgotten. Emma was 7 years old. She liked macaroni and cheese and drawing pictures. She wore a purple jacket with a fake fur collar. She should have grown up. She should have had birthdays and graduations and her own children. She should have lived. Instead, she became a name in a case file, a lesson about vigilance and advocacy, a reminder that justice delayed is still justice worth pursuing. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.